The sun dipped below the horizon in Ogbusu, casting long, ominous shadows that stretched across the town like fingers reaching for something hidden. The streets parched from the relentless sun, whispered of untold secrets. At first glance, Ogbusu appeared like any other quiet, struggling town, but beneath its dust-laden surface, a darkness was quietly brewing, waiting to be exposed. In the heart of this forgotten place lived Livinus, a man whose very existence seemed a reflection of the town's misery. His life was a daily struggle against hunger, his ribs often aching with emptiness. His clothes were nothing more than tattered remnants stained by the harsh realities of poverty. He had searched endlessly for a way to escape, but every attempt ended in failure. The market was no place for a man like him. The townspeople had little to spare, and Livinus could barely scrape together enough to feed himself, let alone dream of a better life. Yet, deep within his soul, Livinus possessed a hidden talent, a rare gift to speak and convince, a talent he had never fully realized. It was on a quiet evening, as the wind whispered through his crumbling window, that Livinus' life would change forever. The old radio, which had seen better days, crackled to life. A preacher's booming voice echoed from the speakers, filled with passion and fire, delivering prophecies that seemed to ignite something deep inside Livinus. The words, though meant for others, seemed to speak directly to him. Each promise of prosperity, each declaration of victory stirred something in him. It wasn't the words themselves, but the power with which they were spoken. He had heard this voice before, a voice that commanded attention, a voice that promised hope. Could words truly hold such power? Could they summon wealth and success? Livinus sat up straighter, his heart pounding. He thought back to his own struggles, to the endless cycle of poverty. But now there was a glimmer of something more. He stared at the flickering light of the radio, the preacher's voice weaving through his thoughts. Could it be that with just the right words he could change his fate? The next day, Livinus' childhood friend Samuel paid him a visit, his face drawn to the weight of his own struggles. "Things have never been this bad," Samuel confessed, the despair in his eyes clear. "I don't know what to do anymore." As the words echoed in Livinus' mind, the prophecy from the night before seemed to rise unbidden from within him. Without thinking, he stood and placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "Your struggles will end soon," he said, his voice steady, filled with the same conviction he had heard on the radio. "This is not the end. The road ahead is paved with blessings." Samuel stared at him, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. Without hesitation, he reached into his pocket, pulling out 2,000 naira and handing it to Livinus. "I don't have much, but take this," he said. Livinus' hand trembled slightly as he accepted the money, his mind racing. The words had worked. Samuel believed him. For a moment, Livinus just stood there, staring at the 2,000 naira in his hand. A slow, sly smile crept across his face. What if he could do this on a larger scale? What if, instead of just a few kind words for a friend, he could speak to a whole crowd, a whole town, convincing them to believe in him? Believe in the power of his words. He could rise above his life of misery. He could become someone powerful. A new idea began to form, one that would take him down the path he had never imagined. And it all started with the power of a prophecy. With newfound purpose, Livinus descended upon the market like a man possessed. His words, once hesitant and unsure, flowed with a fiery conviction that caught the attention of every passerby. He stood tall in the middle of the bustling square, his voice rising above the noise of haggling vendors and children's laughter. The crowd paused, drawn to the strange man speaking with such passion, such certainty. "Support this ministry and you shall be blessed," Livinus proclaimed, his eyes flashing with the same intensity as the preachers he had heard on the radio. His words seemed to wave a spell, laced with promises of deliverance and prosperity. "Your faith will be your fortune, your obedience, your salvation." He spoke of divine rewards, of riches flowing like rivers, of opportunities that could lead the poorest men to imaginable heights. At first, the crowd was skeptical, but Livinus's unwavering confidence began to erode their doubts. Some of them had been struggling for so long, clinging to hope like a lifetime. The words he spoke were not just promises, they felt like truths, deep truths they desperately wanted to believe. With each sentence, they felt the weight of their own hardships start to lift. One by one, they began to dig into their pockets, offering coins and crumpled naira notes. Before long, Livinus's hands were full of money, and the murmurs of Livinus, the man of God, swept through the crowd. He grinned inwardly, savoring the power he now held. He was no longer a man on the edge of starvation. He was a man of influence, of divine authority. The money he received that day was just the beginning. Within weeks, Livinus had taken his newfound wealth and rented a small hall in Ogbusu, where he set up his very own church. The walls, bare and cold at first, were soon adorned with banners proclaiming divine salvation, with scriptures written in bold letters. He used the market donations to buy flashy robes, and soon he was seen walking on the streets of Ogbusu like a king. His voice carried authority, his words had power. People came from neighboring villages to hear him preach. His congregation grew rapidly. At first, just a handful of curious souls, but soon it was standing room only. Each Sunday, the collection plates overflowed, each offering a testament to the faith Livinus had inspired in them. As the donations increased, so did his lifestyle. He was no longer living in the tiny shack he once called home. His new mansion, towering above the modest homes of the villagers, became a symbol of his success. Expensive cars and silk robes became part of his new image, and he carried himself like a man who had never known hunger, never known pain. His followers, mesmerized by his charisma, believed every word he spoke. But with his success came an insatiable hunger, one that could not only be satisfied with the luxuries that now filled his life. The money, which once represented his escape from poverty, had transformed into a monstrous craving. He was not just satisfied with wealth anymore. He wanted power, influence, control over every soul that crossed his path. The donations, the offerings, the sacrifices, all of it was not enough. His vision began to twist into something darker, something far more dangerous. One night, as a thick fog rolled over Ogbusu, Livinus stood before his grand mirror, admiring the reflection of the man he had become. But the mirror was more than just a reflection. It was a reminder of the choices he had made, the path he had chosen. He had amassed wealth beyond his wildest dreams, but there was a gnawing emptiness inside him. His hunger was not just for money, it was for something far more sinister. He had tasted power, and now he wanted more. His mind drifted to the stories, the rumors that had been whispered for years in Ogbusu, stories of a powerful and ancient goddess that dwelled deep in the forbidden forest. They said that she could grant unimaginable wealth, that her power could reshape destinies. Livinus had heard the stories, of course, who hadn't, but he had never believed them until now. The goddess was said to be a shadow in the mist, a being who could see through men's hearts, who could twist their deepest desires to serve her will. The more he thought about it, the more he became convinced that she was the key to elevating him even higher, to securing his place as the most powerful man in Ogbusu, the most revered man of God the town had ever known. Without a second thought, Livinus set out that night. The village was silent, save of the rustling of leaves and the distant howl of night creatures. He ventured into the forest, the thick familiar darkness closing in around him. The path grew narrower, and the air became thick with an eerie silence. Then, just when Livinus thought he could go no further, he saw it, an ancient shrine, dipped in mist and mystery, glowing with an otherworldly light. At the center of the shrine stood the goddess. Her eyes glinted like shards of moonlight piercing through the mist. Livinus's heart skipped a beat. She was more magnificent and more terrifying than any tale had described. Her voice, when it came, was soft like a whisper in the wind, but it carried with it a weight of centuries. "Bring me your tithes, and I shall multiply your flock," she said, her voice a seductive promise. "Your wealth, your power, your influence, everything you desire will be yours." Livinus, now fully consumed by his ambition, knelt before her, offering her the first fruits of his congregation's donations. He had never been so sure of anything in his life. With a trembling hand, he surrendered the money, feeling it slip away into the shadows. The transformation was almost immediate. The very next Sunday, Livinus's church was filled to capacity. No more than that. It overflowed. Crowds gathered outside, desperate to hear the words of the man they believed to be divinely inspired. Miracles seemed to happen in his presence. People were healed. The sick were cured. His sermons became more powerful, more compelling than ever before. His words seemed to carry weight, to manifest the very promises he had once only spoken of. Livinus basked in the luxury that followed. His mansion grew larger, his robes more extravagant, his car more expensive, but the price of his success was something far darker, something only he knew. His followers, oblivious to the truth, continued to donate generously. They believed they were giving to God. They had no idea that their offerings, their hard-earned money, were flowing into the hands of a goddess in the shadows. Livinus smiled to himself as the money poured in. What they didn't know couldn't hurt them, but he had tasted something far more powerful than wealth. He had tasted control. Yet, secrets have a way of unraveling, and in Ogbusu, they were unraveling faster than Livinus could control. Whispers had begun to spread silently among the townsfolk. Rumors of Livinus's sudden, unexplainable wealth, the inexplicable miracles that seemed to follow him wherever he went, and the strange glowing aura that hovered over the forbidden forest at night. The people, drawn by the promise of prosperity, silenced their doubts, but doubt has a way of growing, festering in the hearts of even the most devout, waiting for the perfect moment to bloom into truth. And that moment came on a quiet evening. The old woman, whose name was Adamma, had been a steadfast member of the church since its inception. She had seen Livinus rise from nothing to the powerful figure he had become. Yet, a feeling of unease had been gnawing at her for months. How could a man so poor, so desperate, have transformed overnight into a preacher with silks, a mansion, and a private fleet of cars? How could miracles come so easily, as if the divine were bending into his every whim? Her suspicions had finally driven her to follow him one evening, under the cover of darkness. She had waited until Livinus slipped away from his mansion, cloaked in his robes, and quietly moved through the village, down the path that led to the forbidden forest. The moonlight barely touched the ground as she trailed him, her heart thundering in her chest. She watched from behind the trees as Livinus knelt before a shadowy altar, a towering stone structure carved with ancient symbols. In front of him, the shrine glowed faintly with a sickly green hue, like the breath of a long-forgotten evil. Livinus, hands trembling with greed and power, placed sack after sack of the church's money at the feet of the dark goddess, her form barely visible in the mist that surrounded her. Her voice, like wind through dead branches, whispered promises of more power, more miracles, more souls to control. Adamma's knees nearly buckled as she realized the truth. Livinus had been feeding the goddess with the faithful tithes, not to God. Adamma trembled in shock, but her resolve hardened. She couldn't let this go on any longer. She had to expose him, no matter the cost. The next Sunday, the church was packed as usual, with the faithful eager to hear Livinus's latest sermon of prosperity and deliverance. But as Livinus began his usual performance, a calm and steady voice called through his words. "Pastor Livinus," Adamma said, her voice ringing clear and strong, "tell the church where their tithes go." A tense silence fell over the congregation. Eyes turned towards the old woman, whose frail appearance belied the fierce determination in her gaze. Livinus faltered, his smile fading, the sheen of sweat gathering on his brow. His usual confidence wavered for the first time in years. "Don't be foolish, woman," he sneered, trying to regain control. "I've done nothing but good for this church and for you all. There is no need for accusations." But Adamma, undeterred, pulled a small device from her bag. She pressed the button, and the room was suddenly filled with unmistakable sound of Livinus's voice, recorded in the eerie stillness of the forest. The recording crackled through the speakers, clear and damning. The congregation fell silent as Livinus's words, heavy with greed and desperation, echoed in the air. "The tithes you give to me, I give to the goddess. She will bless us with more souls, more wealth, more power. The gasps that followed were deafening. It was as though the room had been struck by lightning. Livinus's once loyal congregation stared at him, disbelief and horror written on their faces. Their hands, which had once eagerly passed offerings to the man they thought was a servant of God, now trembled in the light of truth. Livinus's face drained of color, his eyes darting around in panic. "No!" he shouted, attempting to regain control. "You don't understand." But it was too late. One by one, the church members began to stand, their faces filled with anger, betrayal, and sorrow. The quiet, faithful people who had believed in him, in his promises, now turned their backs. The trust that had been built over the months, the faith that had been so easily manipulated, shattered like glass.
Then, the sound of police sirens broke the tense silence. The doors of the church burst open and officers stormed in, hands outstretched to seize the man who had led them all astray. As they dragged him toward the door, the congregation stood in stunned silence, watching as their once mighty pastor was stripped of his robes and his illusions. But as they prepared to leave, something unexpected happened. Livinus turned to face the crowd one last time, his eyes wild with desperation. "You think this will stop me?" he screamed. "This isn't the end. You have seen nothing yet. There are powers greater than all of you combined, powers you will never understand." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Adama, standing at the front, met his gaze with unwavering resolve. "You fooled us for too long," she said, her voice calm, but filled with finality. "But your reign is over." With that, the door slammed shut behind Livinus as he was escorted into the darkness, the weight of his sins crashing down on him. His empire, built on lies and deceit, crumbled like sand through his fingers. As this old woman walked away from the now ruined church, her heart heavy but her spirit unbowed, she glanced back once more. The congregation was beginning to scatter, some to their homes, others to rebuild what had been torn down. "People will always seek miracles," she murmured, her voice thick with both sorrow and wisdom, "but may they never fall into the hands of wolves in holy robes." A quiet, knowing smile crossed her face. She had seen deception before, had witnessed its dark power over the weak, but she also knew something far stronger than lies, the truth. And it was the truth that would carry Ogbusu forward. She wasn't the only one who knew this. From that day on, Ogbusu would be ready, for in the shadows, wolves were always lurking. But now, they would be recognized long before they could strike. Justice had spoken, the truth had set them free.